What up? Let's turn that light off. Let's get the full, yeah. There we go. We'll just move the chair over. And we are ready for the best. Let's see. Let's share this on Twitter right now. Back. Had to do a little promoting there. So we are all recovered from, let's get a little higher there so you don't have to look up my nose, from the crazy NHL free agency. The Kings were quite active, but after the PLD trade, you didn't have a lot of room to pick up goaltending. And, their moves were what they used to call, when Dave Taylor was called Dumpster Dive Dave. Because with the PLD trade, with the signing of Gavrikov, you did not have the money to re-sign Korpisalo. Jonas Korpisalo, who signed for, I think it was 5 years, $4 million with the Ottawa Senators. I liked Korpisalo. In his brief time with the Kings, he had I believe, a .914 save percentage. What up, William Zoom? What up? I thought he played pretty good in the playoffs. Not great, but good. Put it this way, he was not the reason the LA Kings lost. But they just didn't have the money. I think they had maybe like $2 million to go out and get a goalie. And they did. Funny enough, it was basically a free agency trade, I guess you'd say, where you lose Korpisalo to Ottawa, but you then pick up Ottawa's guy from last year, Cam Talbot, who bounced around the league a little bit, Edmonton, Minnesota. And they also, in a move that's probably for Ontario, which for those of you who don't know is the LA Kings farm team, picked up big save Dave Rittich, who had a brief run of glory with the Calgary Flames. So as of right now, the goaltending tandem is set with Phoenix Copley, the likely number one, at least initially. And then Talbot, the backup or 1A to Copley. Now here's the strange thing is the Talbot was signed for $1 million. But after 10 games, he gets like $1 million bonuses. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Like if Talbot's playing great, and you're at that 8, 9, 10 game mark and he's outperforming Copley, what do you do? Because they are up against the cap. Big time. So, but the roster pretty much appears to be set now. For those of you who are not necessarily King fans, the roster is pretty much with the outside of the third pairing on defense. It will be Kopitar, Kempe, Byfield on the first line. Second line, Moore, Deneau, Arvidsson. Third line, Kaliev, Fiala, PLD. And the fourth line gets a little interesting, especially with the signing of Trevor Lewis being brought back into the family. So the fourth line, oh boy, that's. I mean, I'll assume Grunstrom, Lizotte, Lewis. I mean, I'm guessing the Kings didn't bring Lewis in to sit around, and I'm sure he didn't sign to, play 35 games. So, and then you've got the kids, Fagemo, Turcotte. I don't think Chromiak is ready for NHL duty, but he'll impress some heads probably. And then you'll have, the next level below that group is, the Finnish kid, Simon Typel, who I like, real nose for the net. Hellenius, Andre Lee, a couple kids in Ontario. Jared Anderson Dolan, he'll probably be the extra forward because he'll have to clear waivers. And some interesting guys they didn't re-sign or bring back is Zach McEwen. So my concern with the forward group is really there's not a lot of toughness there. And I think everyone thinks when I say toughness, I mean fighting. I mean, fighting's archaic, I mean, Toronto signing Ryan Reeves for 3 years, that's a head scratcher to me. Because they were talking about Reeves on the NHL Network. And who was it? Mike Rupp, who I really like as an analyst. Danico's too nice, but Rupp will say stuff, that probably Danico wouldn't. And he made a great point of wherever Reeves goes, there's that 6-month burst where the team feels bigger, stronger, faster. But then once Reeves' playing time starts to go down and he doesn't really play a lot in the playoffs, you're left with an aging tough guy with no other tough guys to fight. So I think that's a contract that will not age well. But, the Kings, to me, the last 2 seasons have been bullied by Edmonton. Out-muscled, certainly. So outside of Grunstrom, they don't really have a forward who initiates contact. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. I know there were rumors of a possible kicking the tires on Tom Wilson because, he's got 1 year left on his deal in Washington. There's rumors that Washington wants to switch it up. And especially with, they didn't get their Russian phenom in the draft on Wednesday. Philadelphia got it right before them. I'm sure they tried to hold Washington over a barrel. Now that Russian kid, I think it's Mikolev, he can't come over here for 3 years. So I think it's a great signing or a great draft pick by Philly because Philly's going to be bad for 2 or 3 years. So you can wait on the guy. But Ovechkin was rumored to have been able to cut the corner in terms of getting him over here quicker. But it didn't happen. So, but the Kings definitely will, I hope at some point, address the lack of sandpaper they have. And there's some cheap options out there. Zach Cassian was bought out by Arizona, so, we'll see what happens there, if anything. And on defense, it's pretty much the same group, even though they've traded a lot of defensemen. It's Anderson and Doughty, Roy and Gavrikov, and then the third pairing is up in the air. You've got Bjorn for it. Here are the likely 4 guys who will be auditioning for the third pairing. And I'm assuming Bjorn Fort has a leg up, if you will, because he's left-handed defenseman. And then you'll have Clark. I almost said Noah Clark. Brant Clark, the consensus best defenseman in junior hockey the last year or two. Jordan Spence, who's NHL ready. Now he has one more year of waiver protection, so that'll be interesting. And then they picked up Andres England, a left-handed booming defenseman, 6'3", played last year with Colorado and Chicago. King fans, specifically Ontario Reign fans, will remember him for the very hard hit on prospect Alex Turcotte. It's a clean hit. So that will be interesting in training camp to see how those two interact with each other. I think it'll be all right though. It was a clean hit, so it's. I think the issue with Turcotte is he's got NHL skill, but he gets hit a lot, and that's probably some of the reasons for his concussion problems. And that's my concern with Brant Clark in his brief 9 games that he played for the Kings. He looked NHL ready, which is scary. I mean, he's so young. I mean, I can't even invite him to the Comedy Store for another 3 years. But he did get hit a lot. And he's not the biggest guy in the world. So, I think and that's, I think, the number one thing with the prospects, not just the Kings, but any NHL team. You can dominate in juniors and, although there are certainly a lot of kids in juniors who hit hard and line people up, you can kind of see them coming because they're not exactly sneaky about lining you up. But in the NHL, you got guys like Tom. Every team has a guy like Tom Wilson, or Ryan Reeves. Um, Guys that will line you up and at the last second sneak up on you. So it will be very, very interesting to see how the Kings protect Clark physically. Of course, I was kind of hoping we'd get Ratko Gudas, who has now signed with the enemy, the Anaheim Ducks. I think he got 3 years, $4 million, and the Kings just didn't have that. We didn't have that money to sign a goalie, let alone sign a goalie and then bring in a guy like him. Ideally, he would have been the ideal partner for Clark. Veteran, tough guy who would have made other teams very much aware of don't touch the kid. So that is going to be interesting to see. The third pairing, how they handle that. It's a lot of youth, and it's a very physical game. So, because I think the problem I had last year, really the last 2 years, is the Kings are definitely not a soft team. They've got some very tough guys. Roy's a very tough guy. When I put my arm around him at the Comedy Store, it's like touching a brick wall. Kempe is certainly a big guy who can handle himself. And at the time, Dursey was, he's about my size and certainly not incapable of sticking up for himself. He'll drop the gloves from time to time, but I don't want guys like Dursey fighting. I don't want Roy going out of his way to be rough. Anderson is certainly a very tough and agitating type defenseman, but I don't want him being overly physical, overcompensating for the lack of team toughness. But, which is why Gudas was the perfect guy to get, but you just had no money. I mean, the PLD contract extension, I knew as soon as they did that Korpisalo was not going to be the goalie. Because I think everyone figured he'd get between $4 and $5 million. So, there were a couple agitating type players out there. Garnet Hathaway, I think he re-signed. I think he signed. I want to say Ottawa, maybe. Um, and Michael Bunting, of course, he went to Carolina. He would have been a nice guy if anyone took a run at Clark or the smaller players. Um, Lazat. He would have been a nice guy to step into the party and go, "Hey, not not on my watch." So it's going to be a very interesting time for the Kings, and also Jacob Movari is, he's out there as well, but he's out of waivers too. So, that's a guy who either has to be on the NHL roster or go through waivers. And I'm assuming a team, he didn't look that bad, but if Bjornfort makes the team, and I'm assuming because he's a little younger, he has the edge that they're gonna lose someone at the end of training camp. Either Anderson Dolan. If the kids play well, and by the kids I mean, if you're looking for the fourth line, since Kaliev's moving, more than likely to the third line. The kids, you've got Fagemo, Anderson Dolan, Turcotte, and you got to throw in like one surprise, maybe a training camp tryout, and the guy who's just balls to the wall, and you throw him into the mix, and maybe Akil Thomas, who's kind of a forgotten prospect because he's been hurt so much, but I think from what I understand, his shoulder is pretty good to go. So he's kind of a fly in the ointment. Because when he's healthy, like he's a big kid, like he's like my size, but pretty solid. Um, you know, training camp's going to be good competition because there aren't that many spots. I mean, like I said, the first three lines are set, and on defense, it's really just four guys trying out for the final two spots. And you throw in a guy like England, I'm not saying they signed him to play at the NHL level, but, he's got NHL experience. So, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this pans out, and goaltending is set now with Copley and Talbot, and then you've got Rittich and prospect Portillo in the minors. And beyond that, I know the Kings drafted a goaltender. They had 5 picks in last Wednesday, so obviously none of them, I think, are anywhere near being ready. But those 5 picks were giant defenseman Jakub Dvorak. He's a project 6'5". I think he's 210. So, and he was, a lot of reports had him going up higher, but did not for some reason. So, that'll be interesting, I think, to see his progression. And then right winger Cone Zemer, kind of an agitator. So I'm a little excited that we picked up a future agitator, real heavy wrist shot. So he's a right winger. So, that's 2-3 years away. And then Hampton Schlinsky is the goalie we drafted in the 4th round. I think he was like 19-1 in high school, so he is 2 to 3 years away. I mean, it's not like there's a rush to get him in here. project and a prospect. And then right-handed defenseman Matthew Mania, cool name. Hope he makes it just on his name alone. And our last pick in round 6 was Ryan Conley, project. When you're drafting guys in the 6th round, there's, they are not, long. Very few 6th rounders make it, but he is was the top scorer in the USHL. So and he shoots a lot. So we'll see. I mean, there are some players who've had long careers in the 6th round, but I wouldn't count on seeing anything out of him for like I said, I don't think any of these draft picks 2 to 3 years. So it'll be interesting to see how this season progresses. And, this is Kopitar's last year on his contract. So, I'm sure they'll extend him, but we'll save some money there. I think, he's making $11 million this year. So an extension, like the mayor, John Hoven, said, is, something in the $5 million range for 2 to 3 years. He wants to finish his career with the Kings. And, he really hasn't gone down. That's the crazy thing, is he is a fitness freak. So, and his stats are about the same the last couple of years. I would almost say he's improving. Well, Wayne, that's a tough one. I'm not saying I was necessarily against the contract or the acquisition, I should say, but it isn't good that he's played his way out of 2 NHL cities at the age of 25. That just, it's, I mean, it's like the old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice. I forget the rest of the saying, but, it's on me. Now, you could make the argument the first team he played his way out of Columbus was, well, Tortorella has made a lot of players want to move on. So, it's not like Rick Bowness in Winnipeg is known as a lovey-dovey players coach either. So it is one of those things that, this is probably, yes, thank you, William. But, I think, LA is a good team. I mean, this is definitely the best team PLD has been on. And like I said in my last video, the problem is I don't think you can say who won the trade for 2 years. 2 to 3 years, really. So if we forward to 3 years from now, you have to analyze how the Kings have done. If they've won a Stanley Cup, if they've lost 3 years in the conference finals, if they've lost in the Stanley Cup finals, then I would say that they won the trade. And then you flip it to Winnipeg's side. If Velarde can stay healthy, I'm not so sure he's not as good as PLD. But that's the problem. Like this year, he would have gotten 30 goals this year if he was healthy. I think he has top 5 hands in the league. I'm not saying he's a top 5 player in the league. He's not. But he has top 5 hands. When you see some of the goals he scores in tight, it's like, wow. Outside of McDavid and Draisaitl and maybe, 1 or 2 others, there's not many guys who can do what he does. But his problem is, it's just he can't stay healthy. He reminds me of my favorite all-time player, Barry Beck. Barry Beck was injured from juniors till his last year in the Kings. Just could never stay healthy, and he was a workout freak. So, Velarde's put in the effort. 5 years he's gone through back issues and other things, and some guys are just cursed. It sucks. But if he stays healthy and puts up similar numbers to PLD, and Iafallo, is he's the perfect utility forward. He can penalty kill, power play, first line, fourth line. No, well, no, you're right, Ryan, and that's and let me finish up the thought on is Kapari, does he elevate? He was a very good fourth line center. Speed, size, a good match with Kaliev and Grunstrom. Can he elevate the third line? Maybe spot duty on the top six. And then you got to see what the second round pick becomes. Is he just a wasted second round pick, or does he turn into like a great player? Because then if all that stuff happens, then you got to say, well, Winnipeg won the trade. So, I mean, right now, I think if you put a gun to my head, I would say the Kings won the trade because they technically got the best player. He's been the most productive, but he's also been the most healthy. And, I mean, this has nothing really to do with the Kings, but, you gotta feel bad for Winnipeg, man. Like, because I've done stand-up comedy in Winnipeg. There's no way I could live there, and it's an awesome city. Like everyone, and if Velarde kind of gave the King fans a shot on his way out, where he said it'll be nice to play in Canada again. I mean, the Kings have fans. I mean, they're at the games, but it's not exactly a glowing endorsement. But it is beyond cold, and Iafallo's gonna have to go to a tanning salon for his tan now because it. I remember, and I've told the story a few times, that I was in Winnipeg at Rumors Comedy Club opening up for Rob Schneider, and there at the hotel they had us at, there was a big mall next door, so I think it was minus 21 out. So I literally have on a pair of jeans, two pairs of sweats, same amount of coverage up top, a couple sweatshirts and a jacket. I think I had two pairs of socks on. Because for whatever reason with me, my feet get coldest out of any body part. And I'm standing on the corner waiting to cross, and this guy is in shorts and flip-flops. Looks at me and goes, "Where are you from, man?" I'm like, "Oh, Los Angeles." Just looks at me and goes, "Pussy." So, there you go. Being cold sucks. Working. Well, I mean, but it's a great hockey city. I mean, maybe the number one hockey city in terms of how the fans take to the team. I mean, the whole town eats, breathes, lives for the Winnipeg Jets. I mean, when I got there and I got into my hotel, I was tired because there's no direct flights from LA. So I think we had to fly into Minnesota, wait, fly into Winnipeg. There was a snowstorm, so it took forever to get to the hotel. And I just wanted to go and sleep because we had a show that night. And then the next day we had to do morning radio. So it was not a lot of downtime. I also wanted to work out, so I knew I had to sleep a little bit. And on my bed was a authentic Winnipeg Jets jersey with my name and number on it. Like, that's how they do it in Winnipeg. And I'm sure they did the same thing for Schneider. And you walk around, every store has Jets jerseys. In the windows, all the hotel employees had Jets t-shirts or jerseys on. Well, I mean, hockey is definitely king in Canada. But I think in Winnipeg, since there's really not a lot to do there, I mean, it's a blue collar community. Even though we went to the Jets, here's the funny thing. We went to the Jets Washington Capitals game, and I got this book, Aaron Volpati's Fighter. It's a great book. I'm about halfway through it. And I was playing for the Washington Capitals at the time. And an amazing fight with Anthony Peluso, the Winnipeg Jets. And I've never been able to hear the punches, but I could hear the punches. Did you ever hang out with Jeff Carter? No, the Kings will never have Jeff Carter back. He's just at the end of the rope. And unfortunately, they just have, well, not unfortunately, there's no room for him. I mean, he would probably, there's no room for him on the third line. I mean, the third line is, like I said, PLD, Kaliev, and third line, who else? Fiala. So he's not going to play on the top six. He's certainly not going to come to LA for the bottom four, or the fourth line, which is Grunstrom, Lizotte, and Trevor Lewis. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to waste. He probably won't. You just don't have the money. I'm not. You just don't have the money, and they are at the cap limit right now. I don't know if you're a King fan or not, but right now the Kings, they're like, I think $1 million or under. So there's no way you could. I mean, they're dumpster diving on goalies. They're not going to bring in a high priced, relatively high priced, free agent like Carter. I mean, the Kings right now is you're going to have to see some kids playing the actual lineup. Fagemo, Turcotte. I mean, I don't think Chromiak's ready, but you just. Well, I mean, yes. Well, I mean, who knows? Well, but you're right though about Wayne, about the Jets and the Rough Riders fans. Like, it's an amazing place to. The funny thing is, we were there as a guest of Rob's friend, who's like this tech billionaire. So we're sitting watching the game in his box, and he's very friendly to me, and he's like, "Hey, Earl, do you want us to go sit in my other seats?" I'm like, "You have other seats? You have a box? You weren't satisfied with the box?" He's like, "Not really." I'm like, "Where are your other seats?" And they were right behind the penalty box. So I got to sit. I just went by myself, and it was pretty amazing. Like, we were so close to the ice, or I was so close to the ice, you could literally hear the players talking to each other. I remember Ovechkin was complaining once about a call, and you could hear him talking to the ref. So it was pretty neat. So, and I have some friends in Winnipeg through my old game worn jersey collecting days, and I mean, but it's just the cold. Getting back to the original point of, I feel bad for Winnipeg because look at all the players they've lost over the years: Bufflin, Myers, Sherratt, PLD, Blake Wheeler signed yesterday with the Rangers. I think Shifley will probably be gone. They can't keep anyone. You imagine if they kept all those players? I mean, Bufflin just basically said, "Fuck it, I'll retire." I mean, Kane, Evander Kane. I mean, if they could have kept all those players, they'd have a Stanley Cup or two. But I'm sure. Getting back to someone's question in chat about PLD and the contract. I mean, the contract isn't that bad. 8 years, 8.5 million, but with the rumored hike and spike of the salary cap, it's a pretty decent contract. If the salary cap goes over 90 plus million, I even saw one projection in 2 or 3 years it'll be at 100 million. The contract's actually pretty affordable. And when you look at Kopitar, probably will take half reduction to stay here. From 11 million to about 5 million. Save a couple bucks there. I don't know if Doughty will do the same, because his contract's coming up, I think, in a year or two, and he's making, 10, $11 million. I think in his later years, he'll probably want one last crack at the cup, and to get that, you're going to have to probably go to the Kings and go, "Hey, if I take half on an extension, we got to go out and get some players." So. I have a feeling that Talbot, Copley, big save Dave Rittich, know, ideally, and the Kings would probably never say this, but those aren't the guys the Kings think can get them a Stanley Cup. I mean, Copley, he's a weird guy from the standpoint of, you know, he led the league in wins um, from the time he came into the league, I think late November to the end of the season. Ingham is a Comedy Store favorite. He's come a few times. Big kid, 6'5", whatever, 210. I mean, when I met him the first time, I felt like the Jewish kid at the mall meeting Forrest Whitaker at Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Like, you just look up at him and go, wow. I think he is recovered from back surgery, but I don't think they re-signed him. Now, of course, they might bring him back like they did with Jared Anderson-Dolan. I don't think they're bringing back Matt Villalta, who is also a Comedy Store favorite. It's different when you become friends with these guys. You become more invested in, like, I would speak to Iafallo, maybe once a week, just in DMs. So, I don't know. I mean, there's really no room. When you consider they signed Big Save Dave to kind of mentor Portillo, I mean, Ingham, I guess you could say he would start in the ECHL and then work his way up and see where Big Save Dave is at, or Portillo. But great guy. I mean, after my show at the Comedy Store, he's like, hey, let's stay in touch. And, he watches my Instagram stories quite a bit. Invited me to play golf several times. Really nice guy. Last time he was at the Comedy Store, excuse me, he came with Akil Thomas. And, really nice guy. He's the kid. And I hope he recovers because, he lost last season due to a back injury, but, I think I could see them re-signing him. I have no information on that, but, I think a bunch of these goalies they signed, I think a year from now it'll be interesting to see where the Kings goaltending situation is at. Because Copley's on a one-year deal, Talbot's on a one-year deal, Big Save Dave's on a one-year deal. So it's kind of scary that they don't have a clear-cut number one. Now, of course, at the trade deadline, something could be done. A team that doesn't have a chance at the playoffs and they have a clear-cut number one, there could be something there. But, trading right now for the Kings is going to be real tough because, they're at the cap limit. I think we've all been used to the last couple of years if they had a lot of room to, like take a stab at, last year's deadline, Korpisalo and Gavrikov. And now they kind of have to restock the piggy bank because the last 2 years you've traded your number one pick for Fiala, which was a great trade. Trade your number one pick for, or first round pick for Gavrikov. They still have an elite prospect system. I mean, when you look at their prospect system, someone like Fagemo and Turcotte, even if Turcotte was healthy, he would probably struggle making this team. But I know they're rooting for him. His dad, Darren Turcotte, was a very good player. And I would say Alex Turcotte is kind of a blend of his dad's skills and maybe with the leadership ability of Mike Richards. So it's going to be interesting. The Kings are definitely going to be one of my favorite teams to watch because, if you look at the West, Edmonton, is going to be good. Calgary will be better. Seattle's not going to go anywhere, and they got Shane Wright coming in, fourth overall pick from last season, and he's hungry. He's motivated to prove the three teams that passed on him, hey, this is what you could have had, bitch. And Arizona will probably be pretty bad. I mean, the Ducks are making some curious moves, like they're in contention. They signed Alex Killorn and Radko Gudas, which would probably be moves I think a team like the Kings would make, when you're that close and you lose to Edmonton because you lost a little grit and sandpaper. So it's kind of curious what Pat Verbeek is doing there in Anaheim, because the Ducks are probably a year or two away. And even Killorn said that in an interview. He's like, yeah, my hope is, in 1 or 2 years, we're ready to compete. So it might have been a salary grab for him, but, it's hard to pass up, $6 million a year for the next 4 years, even with the taxes. Orange County is a very, very nice. It's like the warm version of Winnipeg. It's a very nice area, but unfortunately, the taxes are out of control here in Los Angeles. I mean, we get taxed on our taxes, um, so it's the West is going to be and Vegas obviously is going to be good. Now, Vegas is tough because they're at the cap limit too, so um, they are going to if they have injuries or whatnot, it could get dicey for them. San Jose is probably going to be bad again, but there will be a good team in the Western Conference. That will not make the playoffs. Colorado is a very good team, and they're making moves. Dallas obviously will be good again. So making the playoffs is not a guarantee in the West. It's just like in the East. You look at last season in the East, you had Pittsburgh and Washington not make the playoffs, and they're good. Like, not as good as they used to be, but so I think, the Kings, I think, will make the playoffs, and then, depending on the goaltending situation, you know, uh, I do think they have to start keeping their higher draft picks, just to restock a little bit. But they're also in a position where, um, I mean, I talked about that earlier, Wayne. And Mike Rupp said it best, with Reeves. The first 6 months of any team he's played for, Pittsburgh, the Rangers, Vegas, um, and now, Minnesota, and now Toronto. The first 6 months, you get the Reeves bump where the first 50 games he plays a lot, he fights when he has to, and then, as the playoffs start rolling around, he plays a little bit less, and he's not, the less he plays, obviously the least effective he is. So, I mean, I think, he is what they needed. I mean, they did get pushed around by Florida. If you look at the team Florida threw at them, you had at the time Gudis, Sam Bennett running around like a maniac. Kachuk is a banger. Lomberg is a real agitator. So I think Reeves is the type that will step in there against Lomberg and say, "Hey, cool it." But I don't. 3 years, boy, that contract will not age well. That I would guess in the third year they'd buy him out. But Toronto did lack a certain amount of toughness, and with Bunting going to Carolina, I mean, I get it. I think it'll be a good signing this year for the first 50, 60 games, and then if he starts getting scratched off. Well, that's the thing, Wayne, is like he doesn't really play in the playoffs. So how effective can he be? I mean, I guess you could say it's the old nuclear deterrent. Um, that hey, stop screwing around. But I mean, I don't know. I'd say the Leafs are in decline. They just Dubas built the roster based around four players. So I think that's the rub. Matthews, Marner, Nylander, and Tavares, and they all make a fair amount of money, and so you don't really have the money to spread around other areas of need. Goaltending has been a little wonky. Defensively, I personally thought they relied way too much on Giordano, who is, a great player, but he's getting up there. And I liked Rasmus Sandin, but he had to go to Washington. Obviously with them losing Bunting, you needed to address the toughness issue. And Reeves is a good checker. He's not going to have to fight much. Although there are some tough guys now in the East. My good friend Bokanji Imama, is now with the Ottawa Senators. What up? What up? Hey guys. But him and Reeves had maybe the worst fight in the history of the NHL last year. So I don't know if they'll. I don't know if Reeves will give him a rematch, but Boko's feisty. Um, in Ottawa, they're an interesting team. They'll have a healthy Chikrin. Of course, who knows for how long? He's might be described as brittle, and he's a workout freak. I mean, that's the crazy thing. We talk about, my favorite player, Barry Beck, who I would always say was the older version of Jacob Chikrin, like always hurt. And Chikrin is like, eats like raw liver and works out for hours upon hours a day. I had a friend of mine who played on the Baltimore Ravens, uh, and he went to the University of Miami, just gigantic black dude. And his brother also plays in the NFL, and he worked out with Chikrin at a rehab place out here, and he just said he's one of the most amazing physical specimens he's ever seen in his life. And this is a guy who's used to being around NFL players. So, but hopefully he stays healthy because Kings almost got him. So, uh, it's going to be and Jonathan Quick, some real quick notes before I get out of here. Signed a minimum deal to be the backup to Igor and the New York Rangers. If you can't beat him, join him. Or if you can't beat him, sign him. So that'll be interesting. I think he's got enough left in the tank to play in 20 games. But, that Ranger fan base will get on him if he does not play well. They may not be a Canadian city in terms of the passion, but they're pretty passionate, especially with King Henrik still running the city. Goaltenders are held in very high regard and to a very high standard in New York. So good luck to Jonathan Quick. I'm trying to think of some other wacky free agent sign-ins. Well, Corpusalo, I think, raised some eyebrows in terms of the length. I think, there's some, the Rangers are an interesting team. Tarasenko is rumored to be, maybe talking to the Islanders. No one knows what Kane's going to do. Bertuzzi's a very intriguing forward. I would love for the Kings to get him, but they, like I said, they just don't have the money. Erik Karlsson's, he's out there, and I think Pittsburgh's trying to get him, but like they just have nothing to trade. Like they are the opposite in terms of prospects that the Kings are. They have nothing. So they're in a kind of a weird position where, Dubas was brought in to win, and they have an aging core of Letang, Malkin, and Crosby. So if you trade for Karlsson, man, you're gonna have to give up every prospect you have. So, Pittsburgh's kind of like the situation the Steelers were in the early '80s when Bradshaw was still playing. He was a decent quarterback, but declining, and we could have drafted Dan Marino. And we didn't because we didn't want to hurt Bradshaw's feelings. Like, hey, this is the guy who got us 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. And we ended up drafting Gabriel Rivera, who then got into a horrible car accident and retired. So, it's, I think the Penguins are kind of in that, hey, Crosby and Malkin and Letang got us 3 cups. But, it sucks. But at some point, you got to be like, we do have to think about the future. So other signings, Mayfield signs 7-year extension with the Islanders. Leafs sign Klingberg. That's a good signing. OLD signed with the Florida Panthers. That's a good low risk signing for them. A reclamation project, if you will. Nico Nicola signed with the Rangers, or I'm sorry, signed with the Panthers from the Rangers. And then Jonathan Drouin to the Avs. You talk about a reclamation project. He gets reunited with his junior running mate, McKinnon. You root for Drouin. He's had some mental problems over the years, and you just root for him. He's a top talent, but he just, so far he's on two teams, Tampa and Montreal, and they've given him both pretty fair shots. So this might be not necessarily his last kick at the can because he's still pretty young, but I hope he I hope he gets his life figured out, but not against the Kings. And then, of course, the rumor mill is, many teams have been given permission to talk to DeBrincat, which is crazy that they're going to trade him already. If they do, Ottawa's a weird team. They trade for Chikrin. They go for DeBrincat. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing there. Duba's very busy in Pittsburgh, though. They signed Ryan Graves, Tristan Jerry, Achari to the Pens. So it's they're trying to do it. What two or three teams are looking the best for the coming season? Well, I mean, Vegas isn't losing anyone, so I'm not. I think with them it's a question of can Aiden Hill duplicate his playoff run. I mean, you have to consider them up there. I think Colorado's going to be back. I think the Kings are. They are a sneaky team. They're at the. The problem with the Kings is they're at the cap, so they're going to have some nights where they literally have 21 people on the roster versus the normal 23. So you have the 12 forwards, 6 defensemen, 2 goalies, and one extra, and you got to decide, forward or D. So if the Kings don't get any serious injuries, I would say they're looking good. And Edmonton, they probably have the 2 best players in the league, definitely in McDavid. And by the way, who was that sports writer who voted McDavid 5th for MVP? Like, wow. Hang that guy. And Draisaitl's right up there. But they haven't really done much in free agency. I mean, they did trade Costin and Yamamoto to Detroit. And then I think Detroit bought out Yamamoto. So they haven't really added anybody, I believe. Let me do a quick scan before I don't think. And Duchesne to Dallas, that's a nice one. So Dallas is to answer your question. Dallas going to be up there. Shattenkirk to the Bruins. It's a low. Boston signed a lot of guys, lost a lot of guys. Orlov went to Carolina. I mean, Carolina is sneaky. They're not a sexy team because they play in Carolina. But I'd keep an eye out for them. I think with Hathaway, Bunting, I'm sorry, going to Carolina, he's going to give them a little bit of physical presence that they didn't necessarily have. Any favorites in the West LA? Happy 4th of July, Earl. Any fireworks in what? Yeah, I mean, it sucks for Lois because I would say starting tonight, the fireworks will be blasting for the next 2 days. And Lois hates them, especially in West Hollywood because there's a lot of nightclubs here and people get drunk and fucked up, and so they literally go right outside my house and let off cherry bombs and whatever else they're doing. And just Lois hates it. I think probably the most improved team in the league. They don't really do fireworks in Beverly Hills, though. The cops don't fuck around there. I mean, really, I mean, Lane Peterson signed with Edmonton. It's an interesting team or interesting signing. Morgan Geeky, I liked him on Seattle. He went to the Bruins. Dumba's out there. Does Lois have a Thunder shirt? I don't know what that is, bro. Although I know Eddie Kingston, the wrestler, the last few times he's come to the ring has had a shirt that says Lois Rules. I might have to get that. JVR to the Bruins, that's a nice low risk signing. The Predators are sneaky. They signed Riley and Shen. That it's an interesting. That's good signings for them. Edmondson went to Washington. Oh yeah, yeah. No, she doesn't. I mean, I like the Rangers are kind of making sneaky moves. The Rangers always go for the big fat free agent signings. The Canes and the Tarasenko's and whatnot. But I like the Wheeler signing for them. He's a guy you need third, fourth line speed, grit. You just can't have all big names. And I think it'll be interesting to see where Hellebuck goes. I mean, I think the big names out there in terms of trade are Hellebuck and DeBrincat. And then, Pacioretty signed with Washington, but, who knows when he'll play. Lucic to the Bruins. It's a nice, I was kind of maybe hoping the Kings would kick tires on him. If they weren't going to go after Tom Wilson. I do see Zach Cassian is available. If the Kings feel they need fourth line toughness, and by toughness I don't mean fighting. I really don't. Everyone knows how I like the fights, but Vegas extends Aiden Hill. And then JT Comfort to the Preds. Logan Thompson is rumors of him in Pittsburgh. So it'll be interesting, and the Leafs, having trouble moving Nylander, so that's a guy, I could see Edmonton going for Nylander, I think Edmonton just, they need defense and obviously, Skinner is, he had a good run goaltending wise, but, they also pulled him a lot, so I don't know if they're happy with goaltending with Campbell and Skinner. But, so my point is they don't really need to trade for Nylander, but, I think they want to give McDavid, everything they can and, see what happens with goaltending and defense. I mean, yeah, that's tough, there's not many teams who can afford Nylander in terms of the price and what it would cost to get him. So, I mean, you take a team like Chicago, and I doubt Toronto would trade with Chicago, but like they're a team that can afford Nylander price wise. They just signed Corey Perry, which traded for Taylor Hall. So, I think Chicago. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but they are going to. They're going to be better than I think people think they're going to be. I'm. Susie in the house. Well, the Red Wings are, I mean, if they could swing a deal for a DeBrincat, I think they'll be good in 2 or 3 years. They're a ways away. But, Yzerman's not fucking around. He didn't go there to mediocrity. I mean, he is a winner at every level he's played at. He's basically got the core of Tampa to win multiple cups. So, and Stevie Y we trust, but they've got some work to do for sure. But there's goaltenders out there. Boston is with Ullmark and Swayman. That I don't think they want to carry both. So those are guys that, well, I think, it is, I mean, unfortunately, with the salary cap, you got to be bad to be good. You just have to be, and the Red Wings have been bad for a while now. But they were bad, you got to remember in the 80s, in the early to mid 80s, they were horrible. And then they were great for 20 years, either winning cups or getting pretty close. So, the Kings, they won 2 Stanley Cups, 2 out of 3 years. They probably could have won the middle year if they didn't have injuries. And then, I think Scotty Bowman's not really right for the way the league is run now. He's not an analytics guy, but I think. And then the Kings were, they tried to hold on to the core a little too long, and they were bad for 3 years, and now they're good again. So you have to be bad to be good eventually. So I hope that the Red Wings, uh, they will be good. I mean, I don't hope they will be good. They will be. Sider's a great anchor to hold down the defense, and they've got some great young forwards, Larkin and whatnot. Uh, they just have to get a few more pieces, and Stevie Y, uh, you know, is working on that as we speak. So that's about it for me, guys. This has been Earl Skakel. You can follow me everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Patreon, YouTube. And I will probably not do a lot of hockey streams just because, there's not going to be a lot of big news, especially. I did not read Jimmy D's book, but I remember, that's when I really got into hockey was when the Red Wings, you had Brad Motor City Smith and, who else? Barry Melrose, I think. And I think the early 80s Red Wing teams, they were a sight for sore eyes. Willie Huber, guys like that. By the way, someone just told me Willie Huber died at 52 years old. That's a bummer, man. I remember when the Rangers paired him with Barry Beck, and for hockey at the time, it was like the Twin Towers. But, it just, I think he died of a heart attack at 52, which is scary because I'm 54. So, but rest in peace to Willie Huber. Who was, Probert, Koser. That was more mid 80s and early 80s, Detroit. But, it was a great, God, early 80s. I was a Ranger fan in the early 80s. So, like, all the tough guys. If you look at the 81 Rangers team, when they got in that wild playoff brawl with the Kings, started by my good personal friend Eddie Boxcar Hospodar. This is who the Rangers had on their team in terms of toughness. You had Ed Hospodar, Barry Beck, Eddie Johnstone, Chris Katsopoulos, the Maloney brothers, who weren't like fighters, but they could fight. Who else? Frank Beaton, I think, was on the team. Nick Fotiu. Basically, you had 7 fighters on the team. You look at who the Kings had, Jay Wells, Chartraw, J.P. Kelly, who was more of an instigator than an actual fighter, but like pretty tough dude. And Dave Lewis was a tougher guy than most people give him credit for. It was like an arms race, Everyone was trying to keep up with the Flyers and the Islanders. So I miss those days. But I love you guys. If you could share this video or whatever, that helps me out. Like it. And trying to do more streams on YouTube. Maybe I'll talk about stand-up or something. I think you guys are sick of me talking about roast battle. And I'm sick of talking about it. But every time I'm on a stream, someone asks me about roast battle. I still get recognized on the street from roast battle more than any other thing I've done. So I love you guys, and follow me on TikTok. I'm trying to do a little bit more there, and I'll talk to you soon.